Do you believe that we are going to see a less conducive environment for IPOs? And B, what do you make of that SEBI consultation paper on valuations?
I think they're signaling caution. They clearly don't want these companies to be less understood by the market than they should be. And what's happening, as you can see, is that there's tremendous moves to sort of cost cut and align with what the market's expectations are. And that narrative that, we are similar to US markets and we can postpone everything for 5 to 10 years is a difficult narrative for the Indian market to absorb. So it's not like people are not willing to give value to growth and unit economics, but I think if you give a indefinite timeline for that, the market is not likely to accept such listings, right? So apart from the macro shock, Shireen, which might delay a few things here and there, I think the startup world needs to recalibrate on what kind of companies it can afford to take to the public markets, right? And I don't think there is a shortage of them. It's just that they need to be more prepared, whether it's a Lenskart or a delivery, or just like the policy bazaars and the night cars, where large companies, great unit economics, path to profitability, if not already profitable. Those companies, I think, will shine. I think there's still a lot of demand for tech stocks, which actually demonstrate all of those characteristics. It'll be far tougher to take companies, and those proof points also will be seen, right? Whether it's Navi of Sachin or whether it is Swiggy, everybody's thinking of going public. So it's an interesting time, but the true test will be how these things hold up in a year or two from now.
Yes, that will be the true test. But Ashley, I want to understand from you whether there is disappointment now that there seems clarity on the fact that this overseas listing issue, which was promised by the government, not in this budget, but the previous budget, and then there's been this long wait on when it will be notified. But it seems like that isn't happening anytime soon. Is there disappointment on that front?
So clearly, there will be some disappointment. There is some disappointment because, people have modified structures in a few cases to allow for this. It's not something that is critical for every industry or every company, but there are certain sectors or certain businesses where this would have been more relevant. And so it's certainly, a step back. We would like to have, more discussions with the regulators to understand what are the impediments that they foresee in overseas listing, and how do we overcome them as opposed to just not being allowed to do that. So I think that dialogue is necessary. That being said, a number of companies, even in the startup world, are domiciled in jurisdictions which are a little more friendly, and so from a structuring perspective, there are ways to get around this impediment. It's clearly not the it goes away from the whole concept of ease of doing business. So there are ways to do it, but it's not preferable.
Yeah, Rema, just to take that forward, since we are talking about the ease of doing business, and I would imagine that as and when this expert committee is set up, some of these regulatory overhangs and uncertainties will perhaps be taken up and be addressed. But across different sectors and sectors that have seen significant fund inflow, whether it's gaming, edtech, cryptocurrency, we are now starting to see regulatory friction and regulatory pain point. Is that causing nervousness and uncertainty for these particular sectors in specific?
Yes, definitely there is. And in fact, there's been this exodus of both entrepreneurs, investments going out of India in many of these cases. And we could actually be throwing the baby with the bathwater. I mean, while it is important to be cautious in some of these areas, we also shouldn't be losing that opportunity, in the global market, because the initial success that you might get in all of these, if you just lose that to other markets, it may be difficult catching up later. So we have to quickly take action in some of these, especially around Web3. We have an opportunity to be global leaders on this, and we shouldn't be losing that opportunity as well. Similarly, we see that in a lot of IP-led companies, we need to see how we could provide a more a more congenitive environment for investors to come in, like in biotech and deep tech, I think we should do that. Otherwise, a lot of these companies are flipping out. And that's a caution that both investors and entrepreneurs are facing. And then if the companies want to flip out, we realize as investors the importance of doing that. But on the other hand, we also have a limitation of how much we can invest outside India. So on both ends, we would, we're caught. So the government, we would like to see more policy support on some of these areas. I think it's important we do that quickly.
There are genuine issues of financial mismanagement, in some cases irregularity, where there are concerns that have been raised. But on other fronts, there seems to be much more of an issue of a misalignment of expectations between investors and founders. How do we address some of this?
No, I think, Shireen, you're right. What the issues that have come up in the recent past are a big alert, and it's an issue of big concern, both for investors and for our fund investors as well, because these are things you don't really want. It just destroys value for everybody. Now, as for early stage investors, I think the biggest learning that we are taking away is that very early to put in very good governance processes, really put in those corporate governance processes, systems, create the review mechanisms, ensure that there is, good audit, that the companies are really focused on the business. Just take away as much distraction as possible.
Yeah.
And most important, we are investing in people, and entrepreneurs are also interacting with people as investors. So building very strong relationships is becoming clearly very important. And we are, from the early stage investors, what we are also trying to do is to engage with the company and the senior management. So we build a kind of a good, if I may say good as a word, culture in the company. Because that then, as the company scales and they build the team, it sort of percolates. And today, I think it's more important from another perspective also, if I may share, Shireen, that today in the market, talent is a big issue. It's straining the ecosystem.
Yeah.
And therefore, creating good companies, building strong foundations, creating cultures which is well-bound, good governance structures, it only helps to attract and retain good talent. But that is one of the big challenges I think the industry is facing also.
Let me end on a note of confidence and optimism, because it's very evident at this point in time that there is enough breadth and depth within the startup ecosystem. What are you most excited about as you look ahead?
I think the changes, for all the pain of the pandemic, the changes that we are moving to a more efficient way of working or living is inevitable. It's a irreversible change, I think, in customer behavior. And that starts from large enterprises to the common man who's trying to earn their income through new means of being empowered by digital technologies. Right? And so it's very heartening to see that we are able to see 500, 600 million people now participate very differently in the economy than the opportunities that existed 5 years ago, before Jio and UPI. These numbers are just amazing. The recent number from March where UPI volume beat Amex volume worldwide in terms of dollars flowing through. And 60% was of it was peer-to-peer. It just shows that everybody's empowered. And I think that directionally is what gives me most optimism, that this irreversible nature of how everyone in India adopts technology is probably what's going to create most efficiency and most value in the next decade.
Karthik, Ashley, Rema and Padmaja for today. Thanks very much for joining us here on this edition of Young Turks. We wish you the very best of luck and appreciate your time. We will take a break. There's a lot more coming up. Don't go anywhere. We're back in a minute on CNBC-TV18.